Hey, good morning. I hope you guys are having an awesome day. So far, my day has started off pretty good. I certainly can't complain. It's been a good one. Today, we are going to talk about modesty. One of the things that I have been, I guess you could say, into for quite a few years now, a lot of years really, has been the topic of modesty. I think it's really, really important. Back when I first began the whole head covering thing, modesty followed shortly thereafter. At first, I really didn't know what to do with that because I would wear the veil and I'm like, okay, this looks kind of silly with, a pair of tight jeans. Just didn't work. So anyway, one kind of followed the other. But I'm not really talking about head covering today. I'm talking about just modesty in general. And please be aware as I talk, I don't mean that a person has to be dresses only all the time, and I'm not saying for or against. That would be a topic for another video. I myself do dresses only, but once in a great while, I admit I'll wear sweatpants around the house in a really long top. I think that's important, but I'll wear something like that. Maybe like if I'm going up and down the stairs a lot or doing something where I need to not have the longer dress encumber me a bit. But again, I just wanted to put that out there that this video is really not about like dresses versus pants or anything like that. I don't think sisters who do wear pants are evil or anything terrible like that. I do think the most important thing by far is, are you modest? Can you do it modestly? I believe so. I think you have to do that carefully. And modesty is the heart of what I want to talk about. People act today like it is just the end of the world, that it's legalism. Oh my goodness, I hear so many people say that it's legalism and they act like it's a curse. Well, I submit that it's a blessing, and that's what we're going to go over. I wrote down some points of reasons why I feel it's a blessing. Take them or leave them, whatever you think. But I also implore you to remember that it is a biblical command that we as Christian ladies be modest, whether you like it or whether you don't. The Bible says it, and it's not Eleanor saying it, so don't get mad at me. Let's go into some of these. The first reason I wrote down is probably one of the most obvious. It protects us from the eyes of others. Now, you could argue that it causes you to stand out to others because of how you dress, particularly someone like me with rocking my homemade dress here. Yeah, there's a certain level of attention you get. There are some who disapprove, and there's also quite a few people who will nod to you with respect for it as well. It ultimately protects from the eyes, though, because I'm not displaying parts of my bod that I don't want other people to see. A long time ago, when I wasn't as careful about modesty, I may have had a lower cut neckline, and I was always tugging and pulling and moving it, moving your clothes, trying to hide, trying to keep stuff from slipping down in the wrong position. Hope that didn't blow the mic out when I did that. But you're constantly tugging in skirts, especially if you have a short skirt on, you're constantly pulling the thing down, and that gets really irritating. So it protects you from the eyes where you're not even remotely worried about exposing something that you shouldn't. Now, that's not to say you can't have an accidental wardrobe malfunction, as the term likes to be in the media nowadays. Personally, I almost had one day at Kroger. Even in my whole modest getup, I'd had a top and a skirt on, and I had been losing a lot of weight, and my skirt was getting a little bit too loose. Okay, a lot too loose. And thank God I always wear pantalettes under the skirts, which is basically kind of like really long shorts if you've never heard of them. And I almost lost that skirt. It almost slipped down. I reached and caught it in time. And then I also had another instance where I had been sewing drawstrings into some of my skirts, and the drawstring popped when I bent over. Always carry safety pins. Personal tip. But anybody can have an accident, basically. The point is if you've covered up good, you're less likely to have one. Like in both cases, I had backup insurance with the long panelets and stuff like that, and the fabric was also long enough and big enough that no one really noticed but me. Thank the Lord. But talk about embarrassing. I know my face was probably red as beet. Anyway, it protects you from the eyes of others. The more square footage of fabric you have, the better, right? Now, you don't want to be miserable and uncomfortable. I know some people believe strongly that Modest is also long sleeved and have really tight high necklines. Personally, I think it's a sensory thing with me. I can't handle things too tight, so I try to make sure the collarbone area is covered as much as I can. But there's some things, if they're tight, I just can't stand it, and I'm miserable and uncomfortable. And I tend to be a short sleeve person. Long sleeves make me feel a little claustrophobic anymore. I tried that for a while and I just could not handle it. So there is a measure of comfort there. You have to consider that, but just make sure you're still modest. I think you can totally be comfortable. And just because I wear, a homemade dress sometimes doesn't mean a t-shirt and a long skirt isn't perfectly fine. Sometimes that's more comfortable. It just depends on fabrics and what things are made out of. I do a lot of t-shirt dresses because the t-shirt on top is stretchy and it lets you feel like you can move, and then a nice long skirt to cover everything. When you have a very long skirt, you don't have to worry about how you sit so much. Personally, that is a struggle for me. So I don't have to worry about that so much because I have plenty of coverage. So whatever you do, even if it's pants, a nice long top to cover your girly areas, that's a good thing. It protects our brothers' hearts. Now, this is probably one of the most controversial points. Well, maybe not the most controversial, but close, that I wrote down. A lot of people don't like it when that's brought out on the modesty topic. They're like, those men should be responsible for themselves and they should avert their eyes or have clean thoughts. I will not argue. They need to avert their eyes and have clean thoughts. However, it is not my job to preach to them. That is for the other brothers to talk to each other and encourage each other in a right path and a path of purity of thought. However, we as sisters can absolutely be stumbling blocks to other men, brothers, and even young sons. You have to be careful, and you don't want to be responsible for causing someone else to stumble, because that's what you're doing. And the Bible talks about stumbling blocks. Don't be a stumbling block with how you're dressing. If you're dressing to draw attention to yourself, especially in a sexual manner, I'm sorry, it's being a stumbling block. You have to acknowledge that that's so. Yes, they are responsible for their own thoughts and their own actions. I do not argue that, but you're responsible for yours too. Modesty can free us from fashion trends. Personally, this is one of my favorite parts because maybe it's just my personality. I don't care about fashion. I just don't. Back when I tried to, I don't know, it just didn't fit. It wasn't me. But it's just not my thing. I'm not a mall girl. I don't go out to those stores, obviously. It's just not me. I'm much more of the thrift store sort of person. Now, I do wear store-bought clothing, but if I do it, I tend to buy something maybe purchased used at the thrift, or just a simple plain top or something like that from Walmart or whatever, wherever I can get a nice plain t-shirt that's comfy. I tend to like slightly plainer things. I do have a thing for florals, but I find them girly and feminine. And I know there's a lot of people that hate the way I dress. Even those who agree with modesty, they hate and they find it abhorrent. I've actually had some people tell me that everything about me, from my voice to my clothing, is absolutely repelling. Sorry. I'm not trying to be. It's what I like. The type of dress, yes, it's old-fashioned. Some people call it prairie dress, which is really a different thing, but whatever. I just make plain, simple dresses for myself quite often, and I like that. That's me. And it's funny that these same people who get really uptight about that are the same ones, well, I should be able to wear what I want. So should I. This is what I want to wear. Stop being so picky about it. I'm not saying you have to wear this style. You don't. You can be modest in many ways. You can have the modern modest look. You can have the old-fashioned modest look. I don't care. Modesty is the key. And I think we as Christian sisters should be able to agree on that point, even if we don't agree on what style, because you don't have to. The Bible doesn't mandate a style. but it does ask you to be modest. It protects our hearts from being consumed with vanity. Now, that's not to say that you can't be. You can be a plain person and still vain as can be. You could be looking full out Amish and be very vain. I've seen that mentality. There's been times I've slipped into thoughts and realized, oh goodness, that is so vain. Why am I even thinking about that? But it can happen. We should all always be on our guard against vanity. Though I do think when you're trying to be modest by nature, you're going to have a little bit more of a humble attitude, and that kind of helps you avoid vanity some. Because you're already coming from a position where you're trying a different way. You're not trying to be like the rest of the world. I think modesty can be more comfortable. Personally, I like long and I like loose flowing items. Now, some different people have different fits, and what they consider modest and tightness of a garment is kind of subjective, to be honest. There's things that I don't find modest that other people do. And grant you, compared to the rest of the world, they probably really are modest in compared to what you see out there. I think our standard needs to be from the Bible when we're determining, okay, what is or isn't modest. But anyway, I digress from my point. My point is I think modesty can be very comfortable. I tend to wear tennis shoes with my dresses. No, it is not the most pretty or most feminine thing, really, but my feet hurt, and you have to have comfortable feet. I'm all about comfortable feet. And comfortable, long, loose flowing clothing, I like that. At first I didn't think it would be comfortable, but when you wear pantalettes under your dresses and your legs can stay warm in the winter, I will put sweatpants on under my dresses in the winter sometimes. I'm not kidding. You stay comfy. I recommend light collared, loose flowing cottons for the summer, and that helps you stay cool. It's just I don't know, it's nice, it's comfy, and I like comfy, I won't lie. It encourages a more feminine way. I think even if you're a sister who does pants, if you're trying to be modest, you just tend, it's just my experience, and this is purely my observation here, I notice women who are making a consecrated effort to be more modest, they tend to be more feminine. And I think the Bible shows us that we need to dress in a feminine way. We need to be distinct from the men. Now, I know people argue dresses versus not, and again, that's not where this video is at, but feminine, I think, is important, that you look to be how God made you. That's a good thing. I think modesty helps our reputation and respect. Now, it may not help your reputation with the world, but don't care about that, because you can't win both sides. You can't win the world and you can't win the opinion of God. So I would rather much care about what the good Lord thinks of me than what everybody else does. But there are a lot of Christians out there still, and I think you're going to win their respect more than you would the world's, and that's a good thing. Yet, even from the world, though, there's times, if I think about it, people mock those who display themselves so openly. They'll defend aggressively their right to do it, and of course they have a right to do what they want, but I think there's still a loss of respect there. I can think of a few famous people who have really exposed themselves and you see, even amongst the general world, non-believing people, you see a loss of respect, for better or worse. The next point I have is it's a better example for our children, and I think that is a definite, solid, absolutely. The more you focus on improving your heart instead of being so full of yourself with your appearance, then I think that is always a good thing and a good example for your children. I don't think it's ever a good thing to encourage your daughters, especially, to sexualize themselves. It's just awful, some of the things that I see out there available for young girls and encouraged. I'm just so not okay with that. I think we need to be very, very careful in how we dress for our kiddos, and that's a constant battle with your children, to make sure that you're providing that good influence, but also and hope and pray that they follow and make good choices themselves. But it is important that you're the example first, because you don't have hope and prayer if you're not. The next point I wrote down, and this is what I said might be more controversial, and I was being comical there, is it's more feminist than feminists. And you're probably like, what? I would submit that being modest protects and guards your feminine nature, your being a woman, your right to privacy, to your body, your who you are. It protects you better than displaying your wares like they're for sale. Because honestly, which one is more honoring to the female? Personally, I think protecting it, treasuring it, protecting what God made you, and putting value to that by covering up instead of offering it to everybody to see. I don't know if that makes sense, and some of y'all may be like, she's lost her mind, but to me it makes perfect sense, and I say that's more feminist than feminist. And it's not that I aspire to be feminist per se. I tend to reject most of what that word entails, at least in its modern day definition. I am not anti-woman. Obviously not. I am one. But people seem to think that I am, and I'm not. Not in any way, shape, or form. But I think what that word has been made into has been a nasty, evil thing, and I don't subscribe to that at all. Not even a little. The feminists of today are not something I identify with, and probably never will, and I'm okay with that. But if they want to really be honest with themselves and really look at the issue, what's more protective of the female? And I submit modesty is, and I think it's more celebratory of who I am as a woman. God made me who I am, and this is what I want to be, and so be it. If somebody doesn't like it, I guess lump it. I don't know. Next point. It's likely to attract a different type of mate. Now, this probably doesn't make a lot of people happier either, but who do you want to attract, especially if you're a young lady who's unmarried? Do you want to attract a guy who is only interested in you for what you've already displayed? Or do you want to attract a fella who cares about your heart, who cares about who you are inside, the beautiful person that you can be? The outside is irrelevant. Doesn't matter. And that's something that I think some of us ladies who focus on the modesty topic and encourage that in our other sisters, we get accused of focusing on the appearance and focusing on things that don't matter. I agree, our appearance is nowhere near as important as our heart, but it is important to focus on modesty because it does matter. It's not a salvation point. It's not a work that can earn you your salvation. I don't believe salvation can be earned by works, but modesty is important. If it wasn't, the Bible wouldn't speak about it and tell you to be modest in your attire. But again, it will help you attract a better type of mate. At least I think it will. We can all screw up in that respect of maybe, if you're young, maybe date the wrong guy or what have you. But hopefully you're more thoughtful in who you're looking to marry, and hopefully you're looking for the right type of person. And I think modesty can help that along. Some would argue that it hinders you finding a mate, but I would say that it's not going to hinder one that matters. The last major point that I wrote down is it is what God asks us to do. So stop hating on it. And that's as simple as can be. Honestly, it's not because I tell you to be modest. It's not because any other lady tells you should be modest. Ultimately, what does God say? I wrote down the scripture here that probably the most commonly referenced one, and it's 1 Timothy 2:9-10. In like manner also, that women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with broided hair, or gold, or pearls, or costly array, but which becometh women professing godliness with good works. So, keep that in mind. If you've listened this far, hopefully nothing I've said will be nearly of the weight of what God says. And that's what really, really matters. What does He say? And ultimately, He says to be modest, and He says to keep things simple and not be ostentatious. The matter of our heart is what is most important here. But we should adorn ourselves modestly. So take that for what you will. I submit it's a blessing and not a curse. Hopefully you do too. I hope you guys have an awesome day. And goodbye.